The studio was unusually quiet that day, the kind of silence that only exists right before a high-pressure scene begins. Lights were carefully positioned, cameras adjusted with precision, and every crew member understood that the next sequence required emotional depth rather than technical complexity. It was a romantic climax scene, one designed to capture unresolved tension between two characters after a long narrative build-up. At the center of it all stood Zhang Linghe and Tian Xiwei, both already known for their ability to deliver emotionally charged performances that feel natural on screen. Today, however, the atmosphere felt different, heavier, more concentrated, as if everyone could sense that this take would not unfold like the rest. The director gave the usual instructions. Camera 1 ready, camera 2 angle locked, sound rolling, silence on set. The script called for a kiss that begins as hesitation, shifts into emotional surrender, then ends with separation as conflict resurfaces. Action was called. At first, everything followed structure. Their movements aligned with rehearsal blocking, their timing precise, their expressions layered with controlled emotion. The camera captured the gradual build, the subtle hesitation, the slow closing of distance between two characters who had spent the entire story resisting connection. But something changed in the second half of the scene. What was meant to be a brief emotional exchange began to extend beyond expected timing. The energy between them did not reset at the planned cut point. Instead, it continued with a natural intensity that felt less like execution and more like immersion. The crew initially assumed it was intentional improvisation. Directors often allow small extensions when emotional continuity feels authentic. No one moved. No one interrupted. Seconds passed. Then more. The silence on set shifted from professional focus to uncertain observation. The assistant director leaned forward, expecting a cut signal. It did not come. Instead, the performance continued. Zhang Linghe maintained character presence with deep emotional consistency, while Tian Xiwei matched the rhythm without breaking flow. The scene no longer felt like stage direction. It felt like a sealed moment unfolding without external control. A technician later described it as the kind of silence where even breathing feels noticeable. Then the director spoke, not loudly but firmly. Cut. The word should have ended everything, but it did not. Neither actor immediately separated. There was a delay, a brief continuation of emotional stillness that made the entire crew uncertain whether the scene had truly concluded or whether they were still inside performance space. Cameras remained rolling for a few seconds longer than intended, capturing a moment that was not written in any script. The director stood up from the monitor station. This time, his voice was sharper. Cut, reset. Only then did movement resume. Zhang Linghe slowly stepped back from position, breaking character first, his expression shifting from immersion to awareness. Tian Xiwei followed a second later, adjusting her posture, eyes briefly lowered as she returned to herself rather than the character. The atmosphere on set had changed. What was once controlled romantic execution now carried an unexpected emotional density that lingered even after separation. Crew members avoided speaking immediately. Not because of conflict, but because the energy of the moment had not fully dissolved. In production environments, there are rare instances where performance leaves an emotional afterimage, something that takes time to reset. The director called for a break. During that pause, discussions remained quiet and measured. No one exaggerated the situation, but everyone acknowledged that the scene had exceeded expected boundaries of timing and emotional containment. Some suggested it was method acting intensity. Others believed the chemistry between the characters had naturally extended beyond rehearsal limits. A few noted that repeated takes earlier in the day may have built emotional accumulation that peaked during that final attempt. Whatever the cause, the result was undeniable. The scene had crossed into unpredictable territory. Behind the monitors, the director reviewed playback footage. The framing was perfect, lighting balanced, emotional delivery visually compelling. Yet even from a technical standpoint, there was hesitation in locking the footage as final. Not because of error, but because of how real it felt. Too real, in a way that made post-production decisions more complex than expected. After several minutes, the team regrouped. Instructions were adjusted. Future takes of similar scenes would include clearer timing markers, more structured cut points, and additional rehearsal separation between emotional beats. The goal was not to reduce performance quality, but to re-establish control boundaries. When filming resumed later that day, the tone had shifted noticeably. Both Zhang Linghe and Tian Xiwei returned to set with professional composure, showing clear awareness of pacing and directional structure. Movements were slightly more measured, pauses more intentional, emotional transitions more defined. Yet something subtle remained. A shared awareness that the earlier moment had existed, even if unspoken. Between takes, they maintained appropriate distance as required, yet occasional brief glances suggested mutual understanding of what had occurred. Not conflict, not confusion, but recognition of intensity that briefly exceeded instruction. The crew also adjusted naturally. Conversation levels increased slightly again, technical movement resumed normal rhythm, and the set regained its structured energy. But for those who witnessed the interruption, the memory of that moment remained distinct. Later that evening, during final review, the director made a comment that stayed with several staff members. He noted that the strongest performances are not always the ones that follow direction perfectly, but sometimes the ones that briefly forget where direction ends. That statement was not framed as criticism or praise, but as observation. By the time filming wrapped for the day, no official incident report was needed. No escalation occurred. No disciplinary action was discussed. It remained what it was, an emotionally extended performance moment that required reset rather than correction. Still, the story began circulating quietly among production departments, not as controversy, but as curiosity about how easily a scripted moment can become something that feels unscripted in emotion, even while remaining technically part of performance. What makes this incident linger in memory is not disruption, but hesitation. The hesitation before the cut was obeyed. The hesitation before stepping back. And the hesitation in understanding where acting ended and emotional realism briefly surfaced. In the end, filming continued as planned, scenes were completed, schedules remained intact, and production moved forward. But those present that day knew something had shifted, even if only for a few seconds. And sometimes, in filmmaking, a few seconds are enough to define an entire story behind the story. If you want more cinematic fictional breakdowns like this, stay connected for deeper behind-the-scenes narratives that explore what really happens when performance becomes too convincing to separate from reality.